For these problems, we state whether each percent of change is a percent of increase or decrease. Then find the percent of change, and then round the answer to the nearest whole percent. Okay, so the first step is we need to take this situation here where we originally have 6 candles, and then our new amount is we have 8 candles. And we need to state whether each percent of change is a percent of increase or decrease. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we want to find the amount of change. And so the amount of change is equal to the new amount minus the original amount. This here is our new amount. We have 8 candles now. We originally had 6 candles. Right? So we can go ahead and say amount of change is equal to the new amount, 8 candles, minus the original amount, 6 candles. Let me go ahead. Not sure if I have enough room to write candles here. But the amount of change here would be 2. Notice here that the amount of change is a positive number, right? So we want to state that the percentage of change, since it's positive, there is a percent of increase, right? If this amount of change here was negative, then the percent of change would be a decrease. So I'm going to go ahead and state here that percent of change is an increase of increase. All right, and now we need to find the percent of change, and we round to the nearest whole percent. So how do we find the percent of change? Here's our formula. It's the amount of change, which we just found, right? The amount of change is 2 candles, divided by the original amount. And we have the original amounts right here, right? 6 candles. So I can go ahead and state here that the percent of change is equal to the amount of change, which is 2 candles, divided by the original amount of candles, which is 6. So our percent of change, after we do the division, is going to be 1/3. But they want their answer to be a whole percent, right? So how can we do that? We come over to our calculator, put 1 divided by 3, and we can see here that we get 0.33, right? And so what we want is up to the hundredths place. So our percent is going to be 33%. We take 2 numbers from the decimal place. We take the tens place and the hundredths place. And then we round up that hundredths place, right? Round to the nearest whole percent. And so since the thousands place is below the number 5, this 3 is going to stay a 3. If this thousands place was a 9, then we would need to round up the hundredths place to a 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put my answer down here as 33% of change, and I'm going to box that. All right, let's go ahead and try it again over here with computers. Right? You can see that we originally have 35 computers, and after we now have 32 computers. So what is our amount of change? Following the formula, the amount of change is the new amount minus the original amount. New amount is 32 minus the original amount, 35. So after we do the math here, you'll see we'll have a -3. Right? So it's going to equal -3. So is this a percent of increase, or is this a percent of decrease? Well, the way that you check is if your amount of change is positive, it's a percent of increase. If your amount of change is negative, then it is a percent of decrease. And so since we have a negative number here, we have a percent of decrease. I can put a box around this. And now we need to find the percent of change. So I'm going to put that here, percent of change. And that is going to be equal to the amount of change, which we just figured out here, -3, divided by the original amount. Okay. And our original amount was 35 computers. Okay. So let's go ahead and put that into the ratio. It's the amount of change, which is -3, divided by the original amount, which is 35 computers. I'll go ahead and drop this into a calculator. -3. And I could go ahead and divide that, make a -3, and divide that by 35. And you can see here I get a -0.08, right? So this is 8%, because to make a percentage, you take the tens place and the hundreds place. Now we need to round to the nearest whole percent. So to do that, we look at the thousands place. If the thousands place is a 5 or higher, then we increase the hundreds place by 1. If the thousands place is less than 5, then we leave the hundreds place alone. Don't change it. So we can say here that the percent of change is equal to -9%. I'm going to go ahead and put a box around that. And we are done.